one this happened back in my early 20s, when I shared a cramped rental house with 3 other guys. None of us had been close friends beforehand. We'd just gone to the same college, graduated round the same time, and somehow ended up signing the lease together. Splitting the rent for ways made it doable, but the house itself sat far from the city, tucked along a quiet, tree-lined back road where rent was cheaper for the first several months. Everything went fine until one week, 2 of the guys abruptly announced they were moving out. That left just me and KJ. Out of all my roommates, KJ was the one I'd spoken to the least. He wasn't unfriendly exactly, just absent, always gone. Always coming home late, never up for hanging out. I remember thinking it was bad luck the other 2 left instead. It also meant the rent doubled for each of us. We both agreed that once the lease ended in a few months, we'd go our separate ways. After they left, the house felt like a ghost town. On my days off, I'd often be there alone from morning until well past midnight. Strangely, even though KJ only worked part-time in the mornings, I barely saw him at all. I figured he must spend his nights out with friends. Then, one night, I happened to stay up later than usual. Around 1 a.m., I caught the sweep of headlights. Through my bedroom window as a car rolled down the gravel driveway. The front door opened, and I decided maybe foolishly to step out and say hi, just to make things less awkward between us. But when I opened my door, I heard rapid footsteps coming down the dark hallway. KJ froze just outside his bedroom. Even in the shadows, I could see his wide, startled eyes. "Hey, just checking in," I said, trying to break the silence. "I'm fine," he answered quickly, voice flat. The exchange was brief, but something about it sent a cold ripple through me. He seemed caught off guard, almost guilty, after a minute or 2. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out again, moving quietly toward his room. As I passed his door, I heard frantic rustling drawers sliding open and slamming shut, things being shuffled round like he was searching for something. Then it stopped. Dead silence. Before I could move away, the door swung open. KJ stood there, eyes still wide, staring at me like he'd known I was outside the whole time. I mumbled something about going to the kitchen and offered to grab him a drink. He just said no and closed the door. Over the next several nights, I found myself staying awake until he got home, and easy about the thought of sleeping while he was up. His behavior didn't improve, if anything. It got worse. His eyes looked increasingly restless, and his words, when he spoke at all, were clipped and monotone. One night, as I was lying in bed, there was a soft knock at my door. I never heard him approach, no footsteps, no creak of the floorboards. When I opened it, he stood there with the same unnerving stare, but this time a thin, forced smile. He said he thought he'd dropped his wallet in the driveway and asked if I'd help him look for it with a flashlight. It was the first time he'd ever asked me for help with anything. Despite my reservations, I agreed. We walked outside, gravel crunching under our feet, making small talk. Almost immediately, I noticed his car wasn't parked near the house. It was all the way at the very end of the long driveway. That struck me as odd. But I didn't say anything. When we reached his car without finding the wallet, he began leading me off the gravel and into the trees along the side of the property. I asked why we'd be looking there, and after a pause, he claimed he'd gone for a walk earlier and might have dropped it. His voice didn't sound convincing, the deeper we went. The more my gut twisted, every time I suggested turning back. He brushed it off and kept going. Finally, I stopped and handed him the flashlight. "Here, you keep looking. I've got work early. I said. He didn't take it. His fake smile fell away, replaced by something darker, cold disappointment. The silence between us was suffocating. After a tense few seconds, I turned and walked quickly back toward the house, glancing over my shoulder to see him standing there in the dark, still watching me. That night, I packed everything important into my car. I didn't sleep. KJ never came back. At sunrise, I left without looking back. I never found out what he was planning. But deep down, I'm certain that if I'd followed him further into those woods, I wouldn't have come back out. Story 2. For nearly 3 years after college, I shared a modest rental house with my old roommate, Jason. We'd lived together in the dorms for a year, but we weren't exactly inseparable friends more, like convenient allies. We both planned to stick around town after graduation, so splitting rent seemed like the smart choice. The first year went smoothly enough. We got along better than expected, even renewing the lease without hesitation. But a few months later, long after things had settled into routine, something began to feel off. One evening, after a slow shift at work, I came home to find Jason already there. We chatted in the kitchen for a bit, then both headed to our rooms for the night. Sometime round 3 a.m., I woke to the faint groan of floorboards outside my door. The sound was slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing their way down the hall toward the living room. Still half asleep, I assumed Jason was just up for water. I glanced at the clock, rolled over, and drifted back off. The next morning, I was in a rush to leave for work when Jason stepped out of his room looking groggy. "Hey, were you walking round last night?" he asked. I told him no, but that I'd heard him doing the same thing. We exchanged puzzled looks before I grabbed my bag and left, honestly. I figured the house was just settling in the cool night air, maybe the wind rattling the old frame. The following night, it happened again. This time I woke to the same creaking footsteps, slow and deliberate. Traveling from my end of the hall toward the far side of the house, I lay still, listening. When the sound stopped, curiosity pushed me out of bed. The living room was empty. Nothing was out of place. But what unsettled me was how the sound had moved through the house, as though someone were really walking. Not just a random pop of wood. The next morning, I told Jason. We couldn't make sense of it, but since he had the day off, I left it at that and headed to work. When I came home that night, the house was quiet, lights dim, hallway shadows long. As I walked past Jason's room, I caught a glimpse of him sitting on the edge of his bed, hunched slightly forward. I called out, "What's up?" He didn't react. I figured he had headphones on or just didn't hear me. Later, heading to the kitchen, I noticed his room was now dark. The faint outline of him was still there, sitting in the same spot. "You good, Jason?" I asked from the doorway. No answer. The air in the room felt thick and unmoving. I left him to it and grabbed something to eat. A few minutes later, I passed his door again. It was now closed. An hour later, I heard it, the same creeping floorboards right outside my door. I leaned forward and saw a faint shadow move across the gap beneath it. My gut twisted. Instead of opening the door, I grabbed my phone and texted Jason. "You walking round?" A moment later, he replied, "I'm not home." The color drained from my face. I shot up, yanked my door open. Nothing in the hall, but Jason's bedroom door was now slightly ajar. Cautiously, I stepped closer. In the dark room, a figure stood in the middle, facing me, taller than Jason, a thick beard. I didn't wait. I bolted out the front door and didn't stop until I was across the street. When the police arrived, the man was gone. No broken locks, no forced entry, just one window that was unlocked. but undisturbed. The thought that he'd likely been inside for several whole nights, that he might have been the one pacing the halls while we slept, still make my skin crawl. And the fact that he'd been sitting in Jason's room, waiting, is worse. That night was the one evening Jason was supposed to be home alone, and I can't shake the feeling the stranger knew that. The only reason nothing happened was because Jason had decided, at the last minute, to hang out with a friend. I don't think we'll ever know what the man wanted, but I'm sure deep down that if Jason had been there, it would have been the last time either of us saw him. Story 3. When I was younger, I used Craigslist to search for a roommate to split my apartment rent. Back then, it wasn't unusual. Craigslist was the go-to for finding housing, jobs, and all sorts of things. It didn't have quite the same shady reputation it does now. I made a post with photos of my place, mentioning that I preferred someone round my age. A few days later, a woman named Hannah replied. She said she was still in college, and during our phone calls, she seemed friendly and surprisingly similar to me in interests. We agreed she'd come by to check out the place. When she arrived, she was polite, quiet, and seemed genuinely interested. We settled on rent, and less than a week later, she moved in. There was one thing I noticed. Hannah looked older than she claimed. Not drastically, but her height, posture, and the faint lines round her eyes gave her an older, more mature presence. I brushed it off, thinking she just looked that way naturally. The first few days passed uneventfully. We barely saw each other between my job and her school work schedule. On the 5th evening, I came home round 7 p.m. The moment I stepped inside, I heard quick footsteps in the hall, followed by a door slamming shut. I set down my bag and peered down the hallway. My bedroom door was wide open. I was sure I'd closed it before leaving. Hannah's door was shut, her light on, but there was no sound from inside. Feeling uneasy, I went into my room. Nothing looked disturbed. So I told myself I was being paranoid and settled in for the evening. I started watching TV, letting my guard down until I noticed something. The shadow under my door. It wasn't moving. I stared, realizing someone was standing directly on the other side. Hannah, I called. No response. The shadow finally shifted and drifted down the hallway, ending with her bedroom door slamming shut. The next morning, I casually asked her if she needed something last night. She just smiled and said everything was fine, brushing it off. That night, I got home to a completely dark apartment. I assumed Hannah had gone to bed after a short video call with a friend. I went to shower. Midway through, I thought I heard faint movement outside my door. I paused, listening. Nothing. I finished, only to find my bedroom door standing wide open. I was certain I'd locked it earlier. Uneasy, I shut and locked it again, telling myself I was just forgetting things still. My mind kept replaying the image of that shadow. Sometime after midnight, I awoke suddenly. The apartment was dead silent except for the faint groan of the old building settling. My eyes adjusted and I saw that my door was cracked open a few inches. I knew I'd locked it. Then I saw her. She was in the corner near my wardrobe, standing perfectly still. No words, no movement, just watching. Her face was blank, expressionless, but her eyes were fixed on me like she was looking straight through me. She took one step forward, another. Then, without warning, she sprinted across my room and out into the hallway, her door slamming seconds later. I grabbed my phone and keys and ran out of the building, heart pounding so hard I felt sick. I drove several blocks away before calling the police. By the time officers arrived, Hannah was gone along with nearly all her belongings. We tried contacting her, but the ID she'd given me was fake. Her phone a prepaid burner, not even her name was real. That was over 10 years ago. I've never heard from her since. I still don't know what she wanted from me, but I'm certain it wasn't anything good. Story for after a big fight with my parents. I had no choice but to move out. I was struggling with a place to stay, crashing on friends' couches only temporarily. I was scouring all the apartment and roommate apps when I came across a listing that stood out. A man named Ryan was renting out a room in his 3-bedroom ranch-style house. Rent was reasonable, and he would also be living there, acting as both landlord and roommate. The ad mentioned he was usually out for work, that I'd have the house mostly to myself. He did include a few bold rules. No parties, no alcohol, in common areas, and absolutely no going into the attic or basement. Sounded normal enough. I went to see the house in person. Ryan opened the door, and I immediately noticed he seemed shy, fidgety, and avoided eye contact. He led me through the place an open layout with the kitchen, living and dining areas all connected. The bedroom was spacious and furnished. The rent was a steal for the neighborhood. So I agreed to move in. There was no formal lease. It would be month-to-month. The bedroom had a lock, which Ryan handed me a key for, saying I could secure it whenever I wanted. That first week, everything seemed fine, but I started noticing strange noises at night, creaking footsteps and doors opening and closing. One evening, I got up to use the bathroom and noticed the basement door slightly ajar. Peering down, I saw a faint light in the corner and heard banging sounds. Moments later, Ryan appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looking irritated. He demanded I close the basement door, which made my skin crawl. About a week later, I returned home and found my bedroom door unlocked. My dresser had been rifled through, and the closet door was ajar. I realized Ryan must have a key and had entered my room without permission. I tried confronting him, but when I asked if he'd been in my room, he flatly denied it and rushed out the door. Curiosity got the better of me. That night, with Ryan gone, I cautiously explored the basement. The main area had a cheap carpet, curling at the edges, a single worn-out sofa, and a strange, almost rotten odor. A locked door in the corner seemed to amplify the smell, and I didn't want to know what was behind it. I did a quick sweep and found only old, taped-top cardboard boxes. Later that night, I woke to hear my bedroom floor creak. To my horror, Ryan was leaning over my bed, whispering for me to be quiet and asking if I'd been in the basement. I yelled, demanding how he got in. He claimed he hadn't entered the room, held up his hand mysteriously, and simply said, "I think you should find another place to live," then left. I packed immediately. I demanded have my rent back, and he handed it over in a creepy, stiff gesture through the door. Within an hour, I was out. That night, I slept in my car. The next day, I returned to my parents' house. Surprisingly, things had shifted, and they were more welcoming this time. I moved out again a month later, safely, but that experience left me wary. Meeting a random roommate online can be dangerous, so always trust your instincts.